Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network.
And I'm Pete Wright, thirst quenched.
Today we're talking about Minute 95, which begins with Clint unsure of Loki's whereabouts and ends with Natasha compromised. Back on the show is Matthew Fox. Hello, Matthew.
Hi, I'm glad to be here, and I hope some people are getting to watch the stream if you're members, because both Pete and Andy have dogs that keep wandering to the camera, and they are A+ adorable.
Very sleepy right now.
Yeah.
He's very sleepy.
Yeah. Mine's just the big fluff ball. Yeah. All right. Minute 95, continuing our conversation in the sick bay between Natasha and Clint. The beginning of this minute, in the last minute, Natasha asked, I don't suppose you know where, or here she says, I don't suppose you know where Loki is. And he says, didn't need to know, didn't ask. Is this, I guess it's just kind of speaking to the military mind that Clint has. Is that kind of the way that we take that?
Okay, Andy, I'm so glad you asked. This is my point the first. I feel like we have talked in the past on this very show about the level to which characters are lucid even while they are under mind control, right? This seems to indicate that he knows less than we have assumed he is able to communicate than he did earlier in the movie. Am I reading that wrong? This feels like new information to me, that they have had us believe one thing and now we are to believe something else.
See, I actually took it as making sense, because to me it goes back to Loki's speech about the freedom from being free. Because I do think that one of the things that he's getting at there, and it's funny, like if you watch a lot of stuff on TikTok, like obviously I don't think anybody actually wants, well, I wish I could say nobody wants the Loki fascism. Of course, let's not talk politics, my apologies. But I think there is kind of a common sentiment, particularly about, younger people, about, life's really hard. And sometimes it'd be nice if someone just told me what I need to know and made the decisions for me and things like that. And we all think okay, that's fun if you're consenting to it in a way, but actually choosing someone else doing that to you is not okay. But that's Loki's whole idea. Is he says, the problem with humanity is that you have all these choices, that you have all of these decisions to make, that you have all this thing. You want to be subjugated. You want to just have me decide everything for you. I think that really gives an understanding as to what it is that happens when someone gets under the mind control, which is that if Loki needs you to understand something, Loki gives you the information you need. But in case he doesn't, there's nothing you need to know. Because there's no thoughts you have to have. You get to just be this empty-headed, yes, Loki, no, Loki, I'll do the thing. I'm saying that in a way that makes it sound appealing. That's not my intention at all. I'm just saying that I think that's what the way Loki sees it, and so it makes sense that that's what he would do with his Mind Stone, is he would tell Jeremy, okay, I need you to use your brain to help me figure out how to get the materials we need. And so Hawkeye comes up with the eyeball plan. But if there's no plan that Loki is making that requires Hawkeye to know where he is or what he's doing or when exactly the plot's going to go forward, there's no reason why Hawkeye would know that.
I think that's a fair assessment and also narratively convenient, because it actually it allows us to address all of the potential inconsistencies, I think, that we've seen, not just in Hawkeye, but also in Selvig.
Yeah.
I don't know, Andy, what am I misreading?
Well, no, I think that's, a big element there is it seems all just kind of plot convenient to have them know what they need to know, not know what they don't need to know. And it's all because the Mind Stone is doing its thing. And I mean, Eric also has the crazy passion for science that we always say is potentially driving him for a lot of his decisions. And he'd probably be doing all this anyway, given the chance, whether he had been mind controlled or not. Exactly.
Selvig for Science 24.
But the fact that Clint in this particular place just doesn't know anything, I don't know. It seems a little, a couple things. It seems far-fetched. It also seems I feel like they all had to be part of this plan. So suddenly for him to not know anything, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
How you got here, right? He knows that he got onto the helicarrier somehow. There's never any question there.
Well, remember that he does say, how many agents did I kill? And as yet, we saw him literally fire arrows into at least 2 agents.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And again, I fully agree that this is 100% plot contrivance. But I think that maybe part of the plot, the contrivance is that there's some kind of a fog that when the control of Loki is lifted, that the exact details of what you did with Loki is also lifted.
Okay.
But I think also there is a very scripted element where because if Barton said, oh yeah, he's going to Stark Tower, everything is taking place there, that takes away the moment that we're going to have a few minutes later of Tony being the person to figure that out, because it has to be Tony for this story, because he's the one who built Stark Tower. He's the one with the energy. He's the one who's got the clever line about Loki wanting to have his name on the biggest building in the sky. Like, all of that sort of stuff needs to come from him for that realization to happen. And unless they had scripted this where we were intercutting between these 2 scenes at the exact same time, and both of them come to that, they have that reveal at the same moment, it just, I think for script purposes, they really wanted Tony to be the person. And so script-wise, Barton had to not know. And so it ends up feeling just kind of weak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And that's what I was thinking. Like, there are ways to solve this potential issue, right? There are ways to do it editorially, to cross-cut, to have Tony figure it out first, cut back to them saying, oh yeah, it's a Stark Tower. Tony's like, somehow it gives Tony the win, but also doesn't deprive Hawkeye from his narrative awareness.
Although it does make you wonder, like, if Hawkeye had been aware of all of this sort of stuff, the minute he wakes up, if we weren't dealing with kind of the craziness of Pop Art Warhol, he would wake up and go, oh my God, we've got to get to Stark Tower.
Yeah, we got to get to Stark Tower.
Yeah.
Cathcart Tower Hotel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly where we are.
Fish Named Wanda, great movie. It's funny because we talk about how modern movies are so much faster than older movies. And I've rewatched the original Star Wars movies, the original trilogy, A New Hope, and all of them, with some younger folks who always say that they're so slow. And I just want to tear my hair out. Like, what do you mean? And then I watch a movie like this and I realize part of what these movies are doing, and I do think it's effective, even if it's annoying when I go back and rewatch, is that they're going so fast that you're never really sitting and pondering the questions that we're now pondering. Because it's always like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And so it's kind of like they can do a lot of things with just like a wave of their hand. But then when you go back and look at it or think about it, you're like, well, wait a minute. That didn't actually make any sense.
Well, like, lest we forget, in A New Hope, we actually have a sequence where our principal characters find a locker room and get dressed on the Death Star. Like, that would not be in today's, like, we never have a locker room scene in the Avengers unless it's a post-credit bit.
Hey, now, we do actually have Steve walking into a locker room to get his outfit.
Okay, that's a good point. We do have a locker room scene.
Very
but
well
you
lit.
get my point. Like,
Yeah,
that's exactly the sort of thing that we don't have. Is, we got messy. If they didn't have that scene, we'd be doing Star Wars movie by minute, and we'd say, how did they get so clean? Well, they had a locker room.
There is a famous clip of Mark Hamill. I think it's on the David Letterman show. I'm not sure which, but where he talks about how he said to Harrison Ford at one point, like, wait, why is my hair so dry? In a scene shortly after that, Harrison Ford famously says, kid, it's not that kind of movie. This has been with us for time immemorial.
Yes, it has.
Exactly. We do get to finally see what happens with the water. Natasha, apparently it was just part of her plan all along. I'm going to pour this water and walk away, and I just will wait and see if Clint actually gets up to drink it, because he does. Oh, somebody finally drinks the water. It's great to know that it was all...
He is. The Chekhov's water was drunk.
They have some history with water, I'm sure.
Yes. The water of Budapest.
Wait, let me ask something, because by now, because in the next movie, they very clearly established they're not romantically partners. He has this whole other secret family that she did know about, and she's basically an aunt to their children and all that. In this movie, if you can remember kind of watching it before we know that, do you think they were trying to establish the idea, or at least do a pump fake to the idea of Natasha and Barton having a romantic or a future possible or a past romantic connection?
That's a good question. And thinking about my place when I saw this in the theaters, I honestly don't know. I don't know where my head would have been. I think I would have probably leaned toward they've potentially had something in the past, but now it's something where they are just working partners and they're just very close, the way that it's portrayed. But I never got a sense from this film that they were going to try building a romance out of it. I felt like if there had been a romance between these two, it had already happened, and now it's kind of like post-romance kind of friendship.
Yeah, I think so too. This is another one of those examples of relationship points that I just don't think they had figured out what they were going to do yet, right? And part of it is because they didn't know what to do with Natasha, right? Like, how are they going to explain her relationship both with Hawkeye and then weird relationship stuff with Banner Hulk? Like, it just ends up being weirdly complicated. I don't think they had a good answer, and this was enough, right? This was sufficient.
Yeah, I think it's true. And I think I am very happy that they didn't become a romantic connection and again show that like these two people can be friends. And I now know that I read that back into this movie, and I was kind of curious if people could remember, because I think I walked out of this movie being kind of glad that they didn't kiss at the end, or they didn't have some romantic moment.
Oh
yeah, that would have been bad.
Yeah, that would have been awful.
That would have been a little frustrating for sure. We have this whole idea of them having to stop Loki. And this is an interesting moment where, Natasha's like, we got to stop him. And Barton's like, who's we? I like this idea that even though, at this point, there really is no Avengers. Thor and Banner are off the helicarrier. Tony and Steve are kind of not into it at this point. Everybody's been fighting, but Natasha is still dead set on figuring out what we need to do to figure out how to stop Loki. And if it's just you and me, then it's just you and me. And I actually, for her character, I think that's a really interesting and kind of important moment to have here, that like, if it's just her, she would still go and do what she could to stop Loki. I think that's just so much about her as a character.
She's also a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and let's stop for a second and wonder if there are any other jackbooted S.H.I.E.L.D. thugs on this paramilitary flying army craft. Like, maybe there is a chance that they could lead another team. Like, does it always have to be the Avengers? I guess in this movie, of course it does. But
of course it does.
I poke that question because they're like, once again, where is everybody?
Well, yeah, right. Well, that speaks to actually this next line that Barton says, you're a spy, not a soldier.
Yes.
Now you want to wade into war. What, like, explain this to me. Like, sure, she's a spy, but she's kind of a soldier, and we've definitely seen that. I don't know. Does this seem like a strange angle to play with her character?
Andy, point the second. This was the other thing that has been on my list, because this line pretends to forget that the other footage that we have of Clint and Natasha together, they were in a war zone. We saw them on the tiny screen shooting at stuff from behind a car. Mm-hmm. They were fighting. This wasn't spycraft. This wasn't sneaking around wall footage. This was fighting in a big battle. So I feel like this line was written because it sounds good, and it did sound good, but it does betray a little bit of her history. She is absolutely more than a spy.
Well, especially because they've already raised the question of what does it mean to be a soldier earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
Where the context is a hero is someone who does what they think is right, and a soldier is someone who follows someone else's orders. And there was all that stuff about, like, are we Nick Fury's soldiers? And to this point, if there's any person who has been the most Nick Fury says jump, and so I say jump, it is Natasha.
It's Natasha.
And it was Clint until he became mind controlled. And so, yeah, it feels like they're using the word soldier in a very different way than they used it earlier in the movie, which doesn't really make sense.
Well, and in the very next minute, which might be some of what you're talking about, because that's the moment where you have Steve and Tony talking about, have you ever lost a soldier? So we'll talk about that when we get into the minute 96. But there's also this part of this conversation, like this minute is just like so full of things that I get so frustrated with, because Barton has this, like, what did Loki do to you? And Natasha seems like broken. Like I've been compromised. And it's like,
Yes.
I don't know. Was she compromised? Because again, the way that whole scene played out in the end was that she was putting all of this on as a ruse to get him to reveal information to her.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that, you're a monster, and all of that sort of stuff was part of what she was doing.
Yes.
But now it's playing out like, no, he really did get to me, but I still ended up using it to my advantage. I mean, how are we meant to read that now?
Yeah, it doesn't work, particularly because earlier in the movie, we saw her again in a situation where she's pretending to be afraid, and they're dragging her chair over this big open pit. And yet she, when she talks to Coulson, she's like, oh no, I have this idiot exactly where I want him. The whole point is that she is completely in control. And yeah, it was so funny because I remember, I didn't remember exactly where her line ends. And so it ends with her like, I've been she doesn't even finish the word. I was like, wait, no. Tell me what happens the rest of the minute. It was funny because I watched it literally an hour before we started. She has certainly been compromised in the past. I don't think we've been given to see anything in terms of she's been compromised by Loki. I think Hulk and Barton were both compromised by Loki, and she was put in situations where her ability to function were compromised by the fact that she had to deal with the two of them. But that seems like a real stretch.
We've talked a lot over the course of this season, Matthew, about the director and the relationship, like just everything that's come out since with his relationship with women and some of the awful stuff. Is there something here where this just seems like it was included here because of that view of like, yeah, she comes out on top, but she still had to have been broken?
I think there probably is. And for me, it pales in relation to what happens in the second movie, where, like, I thought the potential of a Bruce Natasha relationship was really an interesting one, until he talks about, like, but I will always have this monster inside, and she says, and forgive me what I'm about to say is harsh because it's what the movie says, and I think it's awful. She basically compares her own inability to have children to being monstrous and horrible in a way that's like just got a lot of people very angry. I think because again, what a cliche of a way to say a woman doesn't feel complete because of that. That felt very male written and misogynistic. And yeah, I think so. It's like I kind of forget that happened in this movie as well because that's so much worse, or at least as I think of it. But this I think is part of that same thing. I think that Joss Whedon is very good at writing very strong women who are all wearing very tight clothing and are very strong in exactly the way that a weaker man needs them, that they need a weaker man to help them. I don't know exactly what Whedon's personal issues have affected his writing, but clearly he has had very bad relationships with women and abusing his power. And yeah, I don't think we can look at his characters without that lens being somewhat there. And when we look at a moment like this, where it does seem like they're making her seem weaker in ways that are very kind of wrapped up in misogyny, it's not a coincidence.
I agree with all of those points. And point the 2.5 continues tomorrow, because I think where this line ends, I've been compromised, where it goes from there takes all of the baggage, the sort of genderized baggage, and brings it back into straight up narrative confusion for me. So I feel like this has to continue, and the scene splits in an uncomfortable way for our structure.
Mm-hmm.
And Monday's minute, really, because today's
Friday. That's right.
Yeah,
I don't know what days are anymore.
I know, it's so hard. Well, I think because of all that, this is a good place to wrap up today's conversation. We will continue this conversation in Monday's episode with Minute 96 with Matthew for one last time. So let's wrap it up here. Matthew, tell everybody again about your podcast and where they can tune in.
Superhero Ethics, great discussion of ethical, moral, theological, all sorts of great questions within superhero media. Superhero media, we've expanded to be anything that kind of is genre or geeky, or we decided that Queen's Gambit was just so good a show that chess is a superpower, as is karate, because we talked about Cobra Kai. And the very, very good storytelling that started in Cobra Kai that's now become incredibly contrived. But we talk about all that kind of stuff. And then Star Wars Universe Podcast, we do episode by episode coverage of a lot of the new stuff that's coming out, as well as more general coverage of a lot of things. We actually did an episode that I'm really proud of that asked the question of, in a universe that doesn't know that Count Dooku was a Sith Lord, but all it knows is that this crazy guy led a civil war because he thought the Republic was corrupt and was going to become a fascist state. Now that the Republic has become the Empire, a fascist state, how is Count Dooku remembered? And is he kind of like Che, where people have posters on his wall because they think he stands for freedom, even though they don't really know much about him? It was a really great discussion. And I think that's indicative of the kind of stuff that we get into a lot on both of those podcasts. So check all that out, theethicalpanda.com. And there you'll find how to email me, where to find me on TikTok, on Twitter, on all the places where we're creating content and where we'd love feedback.
I love the idea that Count Dooku is just another Banksy subject.
Yeah, right. It's
I want to see
amazing.
the art. I want to see the art now.
We're gonna have to. But make that happen.
If those who've seen Andor, there's a young kid in that who has written a political manifesto about freedom under the Empire, and I wonder, is he quoting Dooku? Because so much of what Dooku says about the Republic is just going to take over. He was right. He didn't mean it, but he was right.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh, so funny.
He was also fascist and terrible, to be clear, but...
Yeah, right.
I have to go over to Midjourney right now.
All right, well, that is it for today. We'll be back on Monday with Minute 96. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Oh, Andy, will Clint be able to fly a plane yet?
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.